Canada has fired back at the United States with new tariffs. Prime Minister Mark Carney has imposed levies targeting major U.S. tech giants: Meta, Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, IBM, and others. In response, President Trump abruptly withdrew from trade agreements with Canada and halted all diplomatic negotiations. So, what led to this dramatic standoff? In this video, we'll break down the latest developments in this escalating trade war. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and hit like to stay informed. Trade diplomacy collapses. June 27, 2025. On the morning of June 27, 2025, President Donald Trump announced the suspension of the North Atlantic Economic Agreement discussions in Palm Beach. He described Canada's newly passed digital services tax as an act of war against American innovation. After years of trade tension, from NAFTA to USMCA, steel, aluminum, dairy, and softwood lumber battles, relations have now deteriorated over a Canadian revenue tax aimed at tech firms. To inside Bill C-96, Canada's digital services tax set to go into effect on July 1st, Bill C-96 imposes a 3% tax on gross revenues of companies earning at least 750 million euros globally and at least 20 million Canadian dollars in Canadian digital revenue. The U.S. saw this as a unilateral move made ahead of the global OECD tax agreement's finalization and a direct violation of USMCA commitments. U.S. response, Section 301. Investigation launched. Hours later, the White House called an emergency press briefing. U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai initiated a Section 301 investigation against Canada under Articles 143 and 1916 of the USMCA. Meanwhile, the Treasury began preparing possible retaliatory tariffs. 25% on Ontario-produced aluminum ingots, tariffs on nickel intermediates, duties on 5G base stations. The trigger points: big tech tensions. Fuel the fire. The situation was aggravated by Meta and Google threatening to block news links in Canada to avoid Bill C-18, which mandates news copyright agreements. AWS and Azure passing data localization costs to customers. OpenAI's refusal to make Ontario's healthcare AI data open license. Prime Minister Carney, in office since December 2024, made digital sovereignty a central plank of his policy. Bill C-96 became the financial backbone of this push. A government report estimated the bill would raise 4.1 billion Canadian dollars in its first year and average 5.3 billion Canadian dollars annually, funding Canada's National AI Innovation Hub based in the Montreal-Waterloo corridor. Trump strikes back. Tech protectionism goes global. Trump's campaign promises included shielding Silicon Valley from foreign taxation. Letting Canada implement the G7's first comprehensive digital tax was seen as politically explosive. The USTR's 301 committee deemed the tax discriminatory in its initial review. It warned that the U.S. could hit Canada with new tariffs within 90 days if the bill is enacted. Targets of the first tariff round: raw aluminum, nickel products, AI chip modules, 5G infrastructure, wooden furniture. Canada exported $18 billion worth of these goods to the U.S. in 2024. Market impact, tech stocks and corporate reactions. Markets were rattled. Meta's stock jumped 4% at open with the expected $320 million tax likely passed on to ad pricing. Alphabet anticipated a $540 million Canadian dollars tax, hoping to recoup costs if U.S. Treasury eases restrictions on federal cloud contracts. Amazon faced a $1.1 billion exposure from Canadian sales. IBM and Microsoft began converting contract fees into post-tax discounts due to new data rules. By day's end, markets had shed $98 billion in value, later recovering most losses after news of a China truce revived investor sentiment, trimming the loss to $14 billion. For economic fallout, GDP, jobs, and inflation. The wider economic toll is beginning to emerge. Oxford Economics estimates U.S. GDP will shrink by 0.1% from 2025 to 2027. 79,000 U.S. jobs could be lost. CPI may rise 0.2 to 0.6%. Hardest hit, the Michigan-Ontario auto corridor due to rising costs for aluminum panels and nickel-based battery parts. In Canada, the Bank of Canada predicts 0.38% GDP loss annually. Core inflation to climb 0.9% in 2026. Losses of 4.5 billion Canadian dollars in auto, 1.9 billion Canadian dollars in metallurgy, and 1.2 billion in forestry or furniture industries. Legal maze, WTO deadlock. International law offers no clear answers. Canada argues that Bill C-96 is a temporary step while awaiting OECD's global agreement. The U.S. claims Canada violated its USMCA pledge to honor multilateral rules. A ruling could come through. USMCA dispute panels, 6+ months. ICE-ID arbitration, up to 2 years. WTO is off the table due to an ongoing deadlock. Defense card enters the game. In a surprising twist, Ottawa is leveraging defense procurement as pressure. Canada is reviewing its F-35 deal to potentially expand its defense pact with the EU. The possibility of switching to Gripen EF fighters has prompted responses from Lockheed Martin and Pratt & Whitney. Ottawa is making it clear they won't back down on digital taxes without a fight. Trump is looking to escalate tariffs and attract Canadian aluminum and battery investments to the U.S., backed by Michigan lawmakers. Political stakes. Rise, elections, and populism collide. Domestically, the situation is politically charged. Trump's hardline stance appeals to Rust Belt voters, but risks backlash from Iowa and Nebraska, farmers still recovering from prior trade wars. In Canada, Carney enjoys popular support, especially with promises to reinvest tech tax revenues into national priorities. The Conservative Party, however, warns that a U.S. trade war could hurt Canadian manufacturers. What happens next? 3 scenarios. 1. OECD delay and mutual de-escalation. Ottawa backs down voluntarily. U.S. suspends, but doesn't enact, tariffs. 2. Full trade war. Section 301 finds harm. Tariffs become permanent. Canada responds with a 20% retaliatory tariff, slamming the Michigan-Ontario supply chain. 3. Defense-linked escalation. Ottawa shifts to Eurofighter or Gripen, and the U.S. slows NORAD modernization, straining NATO and Arctic defense coordination. Conclusion: a new era of digital trade warfare. As Canada becomes the first G7 nation to implement a global digital income tax on U.S. tech giants, Washington frames the move as discriminatory. With EU defense deals, U.S. elections, and global tax reform all in flux, the fight has gone far beyond cloud services and into geopolitics, touching everything from AI chips and 5G networks to quantum encryption and defense tech. This isn't just about taxation anymore. The summer of 2025 might be remembered for proving that even the cloud is taxable. Whoever shapes the rules now may not just collect tax, but control the flow of data, AI, and global digital infrastructure for years to come.
If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way.